Has anybody got any questions? Because we've got a few minutes, maybe more than a few minutes. Yeah, we've got 12 minutes. We can solve a lot of problems in 12 minutes. 12 minutes before 7 o'clock. Thinking about color right now. Some of the oaks are turning early, the red oaks that turn red. The white oak group turns maroon, and some of them are also turning early. Now, generally, they wait until weeks after the maples turn. But there is some good color going on. But Marion sent this yesterday. She said it's her neighbor's viburnum. This viburnum over here, this big guy. There is also an oak leaf hydrangea down next to it. Oak leaf hydrangea? Some kind of hydrangea. She called it an oak leaf hydrangea, but just to give you an idea of the scale, she said she told her neighbor that in March he should cut it to rejuvenate it and asked for some advice. Maybe some of you have a viburnum like this. It looks to me like a double file viburnum. The pictures are, Marion is not here yet, so I won't go into it too much, but for those of you who are going to send pictures, this is a reduced file size picture. I don't know how it happens to some people. It might be when you cut and paste a picture in instead of attach it. If you attach it from your camera, from your phone, or from wherever, generally your picture is going to come across full resolution, so that when I blow it up to look at detail, like this part up here, we can see it better. Because I was looking to see what kind of viburnum this is. The flower, which this wouldn't be the normal season when it flowers, but a lot of the viburnums do throw a few flowers in the fall. From the flower and the leaf, it looks like it's a double file viburnum. And in various places, I think I see red pedicels, the stalks that hang onto the little red fruit. But now that I'm looking at it here, I think I see some blue fruit down here, which would make it an arrowwood viburnum. But whichever viburnum it is, we'll talk about it when we see, when I see that Marion is here. They're not easy to cut small. Viburnums, if cut hard to keep them small, once they've gotten big, they throw new shoots that grow 5-6 feet a year. And you have to work hard to keep them under control and to figure out which ones you want to use and give them a good shape. It's better for most of the viburnums to put them in and just let them be the size that they're going to be. Otherwise, it's a lot of work every year. So we're up in Sault Ste. Marie, and we've just driven through wonderful, wonderful fall color. We rarely have been in the Upper Peninsula this time of year, because generally in our adult lives, we've been closing up people's gardens this time of year, and it's as busy as spring. So we don't get away until after the peak colors have passed, but they're on up here now. So we'll have lots of fall color pictures. So I will tell you, this is a Birkwood viburnum, which is nearly evergreen, and in some years has wonderful fall color and then holds the leaves through the winter. They're not this color. They tend to go back to being a deep green. But I do love the Birkwood viburnums, and I love the years when they change color. Okay. Sonia will be here later, and there is arrowwood viburnum, one of what I think might have been what Marion sent us a picture of. I would say that they are 10 feet tall and maybe 12 to 15 feet across. And if you've got the room for them, they are spectacular, long-lived, easy shrubs. The only problem we've had with them recently is the arrival of the viburnum leaf beetle, which has a couple generations a year, and if it gets into the plant and eats the leaves, when the plant gets defoliated twice a year for a couple of years, it'll die back, which isn't exactly what you want to have happen. So the viburnums with a fuzzy leaf, double file viburnum has a fuzzy leaf. You feel it, and it's not smooth and shiny. It's actually got fuzz hair on it. The hair appears to be something that the beetle larvae can't eat very well. Think of yourself trying to eat what are those things called? Sea urchin. Think if you tried to eat a sea urchin whole, all those spines sticking out in all directions. That's a relative size for the mouth of the beetle larvae. and the hairs on those viburnums, it's hard for them to eat. So stick with viburnums with the fuzzy leaves, like the Korean spice viburnum and the leatherleaf viburnum and the double file viburnum that have the fuzzy leaves. That is a black gum. You don't usually see the fruit on it. It's one of those trees with a male and a female, and most people don't have, few people have room in their yards for two black gums. And it's not commonly planted, so many neighborhoods don't even have one black gum in them, but oh, they just shine in the fall, absolutely shine. I think we've got it, there it is. That's a black gum. It's not full grown yet. When they're full grown, they're easily big as some of those big oak trees. In fact, the first black gums that I saw, not too far from where we were living at the time, I've gone past them every year and thought that they were oaks until one year I saw them in color and went, wait, those aren't oaks. You know, they had big 24-inch diameter trunks and they were 70 feet tall and they were black gums. And shortly after we discovered them and came to love them, somebody bought the property and tore down the house and built a big house and took down both trees. I hate to see trees go. Stephen is here, but we are in the Sioux because there is a hockey tournament for the youngsters here. And we have a grandson in the hockey tournament, and Steve dearly, dearly loves to go to the hockey games and hang out with the parents and the grandparents who come to watch. He can talk hockey all day long with people. So he might join us later. It depends on how long the current game lasts. But we came up to the Sioux for this. Steve was going to come by himself, but I talked him into letting me come along because seeing fall color is really a nice thing. There's Sonia.
Here I am. It's my first Friday, so I wasn't sure how
And
soon things started or what.
Sonia is going to take us on a tour. Since we're touring, we're in the Upper Peninsula. Sault Ste. Marie is at the top of Michigan's Upper Peninsula on the east side. And it is Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan that I'm in right now, but we are staying, our hotel is in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, across the way. It's a popular place to be this time of year. If you ever come up here, not only do you want to see the Sioux locks, which are pretty impressive, getting these huge tankers and freighters through that are carrying steel from Minnesota and Wisconsin around to, and lots of other things around down through Huron, and they keep on going all the way out into the Atlantic through the St. Lawrence Seaway. So see the Sioux locks, but also make sure that if it is in the winter time or if it was in the fall, up to 1 week ago, we just missed it. There is a train that goes out of the Canadian Sault Ste. Marie. It's called the Snow Train, and it's a 5-hour trip out and 5-hour trip back up into Northern Ontario. You go through gorges and chasms, gorges and valleys across the top of very high hills. We don't call them mountains in this part of the world. And it's beautiful in the wintertime, but they also run it for the fall color, which it ended that far north last week. So take a look at those couple of things, and let's see, probably time to start, right? There we go. So you will see lots of pictures of fall color because that seemed to me to be a good thing to stick up in the questions pictures. So welcome to Free4All Friday, our 22nd Free4All Friday, where we ask anybody to come. Everybody is welcome. We're celebrating growing. We're cultivating problem solving. We're doing that as a group. People send their questions into us. We figure out what kind of answers we might give, but we ask you to bring your questions and your answers too, because the more people talk, the more that they learn. We come to you from gardenataz.org. I'm Janet McConovich, and Stephen Nicola is missing right now, but he'll be around. Those of you who have been here before know that we ask you to keep your microphone muted and your camera off, but you are welcome anytime to chat a question in, which we will try to keep track of. And we also let you raise your hand and you can speak your question. So make sure your microphone and video are muted, that they look like so on your control bar, which might be at the top of the screen for you. And you can open your participants where there may be the raise your hand control or that raise your hand control. So you can open chat to put your questions in. And the raise your hand control will be in participants or it might be in reactions. So let's move on to the 22nd episode here of Free for All Friday. Ask people, ask your friends to join us because you are welcome to. This is my husband, Stephen, and that's me, Janet, in a very nice day when our daughter, Sonia Nicola, took that picture of us because we needed an updated picture, constantly needed an updated picture when we've been doing it for 40 years. Sonia is with us today as an adventurer, a traveler herself. She was in Germany and Austria this summer, and I asked her, could you take some pictures of things that we gardeners might like to see, and you can show us what you've been looking at, because she'll poke her nose into just about anything and make friends with just about anybody. And she's going to do that today. I've been poking around on our website quite a bit lately, and not only do I find that there's a lot of things we still haven't posted on there, but there's a lot of things we posted on there that I need to update. I think I could use a right-hand computer person helping out, because we still haven't put up most of our Michigan Gardener articles, and still have a lot of things from our books to add to the thousands of pages that are there already. If you want to tell somebody about Free for All Fridays, if you say this is a good thing to do and someone else might want to come and ask questions or talk with other gardeners, you can do that even if they're not on our list. So you probably got an invitation from us. We send out an invitation. If you don't get an invitation, you can just go to our Fridays page. Just go to gardenataz.org, click on Fridays on the main menu, and there will be a link, which we promise to keep updated, for the meeting that week. And all you got to do is click on the link or type in the meeting ID if you'd rather do that on a Zoom screen. So I will ask again if there's any questions, and I'll see if I can look at chat. I did not notice until just now that chat, let's see anything on here except who joined.
No, I haven't seen anything come into chat yet.
Okay, good, because I didn't notice until today that when I opened chat, it showed me last session's chat.
Oh, that's weird.
I do see a note from Marilyn Olympich that Roy Prentice is retiring from Tollgate Farm this year. Our friend Roy Prentice has managed the farm, which is a Michigan State University educational facility in Novi, Michigan, for decades. And he is a wonderful, wonderful man, an excellent gardener, a horticulturalist, a great leader of volunteers. He's just a wonderful person, and we knew sooner or later he was going to retire, and this will be the year. So if you've ever been out to Tollgate, you might want to contact some of your master gardener friends who help with the gardens out there, and get in on their potluck and send off them. So I will tell you one thing that we brought, and then leave you with Sonia for a while, because let's see, how do I get rid of that? I can't click on where I want to click, so we have to go through some pictures here. We've had our first frosts in my part of Michigan. Our frost date, which is the point when we're more than 50% likely to have a frost overnight, that was this week on the 15th. We did indeed have a frost. And this time of year, it's worth watching the frost patterns, because they will tell you very clearly where the protected places in your yard are. So you look, for instance, at how a tree keeps the ground warmer. I mean, there's no frost underneath that Japanese maple, because the Japanese maple branches re-radiated heat coming from the ground back down to the ground and kept it warmer there, which means that it's protected under there, which means that those things that we're always trying to push, no matter that climate change is happening, and we can grow things that we couldn't grow 20 years ago anyway, we still want to push it and grow something that we can't quite grow. You want a protected place for something like that. So in our front yard, where the trees shade the front portion that also happens to be on the north side of tall perennials, a lot of frost accumulated. See it there? Our woolly thyme is very icy thyme there. It's not going to hurt that plant. But there's no frost on our lawn, because we have these shadows that you see here are high branched fir, pine, and a neighbor's maple and oak. They're protecting the yard. So the front yard is quite protected by trees, whereas right across the street, the whole front yard is iced up. Sometimes the north facing slope, this is a north slope, will be heavier. Sometimes an area near your house will surprise you by being protected or more cold because the cold air settles there. Okay, and I see a question from Carol. So we'll do that question, which is how long I have to wait until oak trees can be pruned. Oak trees are safely pruned once we've had a killing frost, is the whole idea. There are experts who are now saying that no, we can probably prune them anytime after the fall leaves start coming down, but there are people that I trust who say no, we should prune only when there's no possibility that beetles can be flying, because beetles are what carry the fungus that is causing oak wilt to kill oaks. I mean, big oaks can die in a matter of weeks if oak wilt gets in, and the spores are carried around by the beetles, and the beetles are attracted very quickly to cut wood. I think I've told you before about cutting a quince tree one year. I made one cut, realized I should take pictures since it's a quince and I don't cut quinces very often. I climbed down the ladder, got my camera from 10 feet away, went back up the ladder, and already there was a lightning bug on the sap of the cut, drinking the sap. So where it happens very quickly. So you don't want to be cutting your oaks during beetle flying season, which means you start from killing frost, which is generally in November, and you can prune in through March until things start to warm up again. So you got a little bit longer before it's safe to do it. And Donna says her arborist won't touch the oaks until January. See, there are disagreements among the experts on what's going on and how long you can get a beetle to fly and what climate change is doing to us. We've had such warm Decembers that some people are saying, I'm backing off of December even. But at any rate, not during the growing season. You see somebody pruning an oak during the growing season, it better be because they're taking a dangerous limb off that they have to take off at that time of year, and they better then be painting wood glue over the cut right away. Take the cut, paint it with glue in order to seal in the smell that attracts the beetles that carry the spores. And with that, I want to turn this over for a while to Sonia Nicola, who you know. I will stop my share and turn over to Sonia because I would love to see what she found. Stop share. There we go. I would love to see what you saw. She sent us lots of pictures while they were there, but she also took lots of pictures. So take it away, Sonia.
Hello, everyone, and special hello to the Saturday crew. This is my first Friday joining, and I don't know if you recognize the background. I am in Command Control Central today. I'm actually at Janet and Steve's house while they're away. So everyone's traveling. Everyone's in new places. All right, here's what I've got for you. Let me just get the chat window back up. So if anyone has any questions or anything, I can see what's going on there. So I have a 4-part tour of the gardens of Germany. But I've got everyone here under slightly false pretenses because we're going to start not so much with the gardens of Germany, but with the beer gardens of Germany and Austria. Our trip did include both countries. We started sending pictures to Janet and Steve. This is me and my husband Cam, who were on this trip. All right, so we started. Yep, excellent. We started out sending pictures from beer gardens as sort of a bit of a joke. As you know, Janet and Steve are always in gardens and sending great pictures, so we should send pictures from gardens. But the more that I thought about it, in almost all cases, the beer gardens are actually garden space. One of the things that impresses me most is how much the green is interwoven into these places to eat and drink. Eating and drinking mostly beer and mostly bread and cheese and meat. I ate bread and cheese for almost 2 weeks straight. So this particular beer garden where I want to start, this is my husband's favorite beer garden in the world. It's enormous. This is, conservatively speaking, 1/16 the size of this enormous place. And these tables are always this close. These are not sort of tables on reserve. We were there at a relatively quiet moment. And it's just full of full of people, full of trees, full of shade. Not nearly as full as it gets at night, but even during the day, even at night, and forgive the picture here, or I'll ask Cam's forgiveness for the picture here. Back here, it's not a great shot, but there's a playscape. It's a playscape we rated probably about 3 out of 10 by Janet and Steve's grandkids, my nieces and nephews. But it really is a park space, an open space for people to sit and drink and talk. And it really feels nice to be there. The mood changes in the evenings. It can get just about full. We were there at this beer garden again at night. I don't have a picture from there, but this is an example of a beer garden in Salzburg that was absolutely rammed full. But still, you see, it's like you're eating and drinking and gathering in a park, in and amongst the trees. You're sitting against the trees. You're sitting under the trees. The amount of sweeping and maybe leaf blowing or what they must have to do to keep, especially as we get later into the summer, to keep the grounds clear is amazing. So yeah, this is an example of what happens in these beer gardens in the evening. I should also note that this particular beer garden is in the base and in the grounds of a monastery right on the river in Salzburg. So this is the building. In fact, that's probably one of those trees that we are seeing there. So everything being so tightly woven together, the historical life, the religious life, the secular life, the party life, a really, really pretty remarkable thing. We went to a lot of beer gardens, and some of them had pretty extraordinary views. Anyone who is a World War II buff, you might recognize this is what the Allies called the Eagle's Nest, but it's the Kalstein House, which was part of Hitler's secret compound that the Allies took over. And now you can sit and have a beer. All the tourists from all over the world and the paragliders can all sit and have a beer in Hitler's private party spot. And that makes me sort of happy to know that people of all stripes and flavors and colors and sizes and nationalities and religions can sort of just toast to the demise of somebody who thinks that this kind of view and this kind of land belongs to him and his people exclusively. This took, to get here, it took 3 buses, no, sorry, a train, 3 buses, and then a 20-minute climb up to the top. But there was, Marilyn, you've been at Eagle's Nest, fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, I could imagine when we were reading the history of it as a museum, that, you know, it's a complicated topic for making a museum or making a tourist spot out of. It was so busy, Marilyn. I don't know about you, but the second bus we took was just crammed full of people heading up there. But even without all of the travel dramatics, there are some beer gardens that have some incredible views as well. This is Kloster Andex, Andex, and this is a bit south of Munich. You have to take a train out of Munich for, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes out of the central city, and you're in the middle of farmland, and it's another quite large beer garden with tables everywhere, and there's not so much trees that you're sitting in amongst. You're sitting above the trees and looking out over the farmland, and it was a particularly beautiful spot. A lot more pastoral than Eagle's Nest, but no less fulfilling. It's part of, again, a monastery complex. This is the tradition, like in Salzburg, that the monastery, the church, the brew house, the beer garden are all part of the same complex. This church here, the Pilgrimage Church, is probably the fanciest church that we saw on our trips. As my husband said, my husband is a brewer. He walked in and looked up. He said, "I guess beer money is good money," that you can build and sustain a church like this. So sitting out here in this beer garden, again, bread and cheese, I promise you, that's pretty much all it is, and the best bread and cheese you will ever have. But then people sitting with their dog at the table next to us. You might notice the sweat stain on the back of this particular gentleman, and this is not to shame him. This is an intentional picture because after you take the train out of Munich to get to this particular beer garden, you actually have an hour-long walk through the woods on a quite well-maintained path, although my husband tells me when he was here as a student that there used to be signs talking about how many people had not made it home because it is a little bit of a ravine. And after you finish your pints, you need to be a little careful on the walk home, but it's a steady incline, probably gain a couple hundred meters over the course of the hour. And it was a absolutely glorious, just beautiful walk, and a good way to prepare yourself for your beer and bread and cheese, and a good way to walk off your beer and bread and cheese. Some extraordinary trees along the side of the path that I would have stayed to take more pictures, but I was being hustled by my travel partner to let's get going so we can get on to the show. Maryland, yeah, fantastic. I'm so glad that you got to experience that. Some of the meats that they have, I don't eat walking meat myself, but it's amazing. People were coming out with full pig shoulders. I mean, just like Renaissance fair style, big hunks of meat and all the sausages you could imagine. One of the other dogs at the table next to us actually got to clean off one of the bones. But also just something I liked about the integration of the people, the dogs, the trees. Everyone's just kind of hanging out there together. So yeah, almost every beer garden that we went to, even the ones that weren't very good, I think you might be able to see from my husband's face here that he was not entirely impressed with this particular brew. The green was emphatic. We're almost always sitting, yes, under an umbrella, but also under and amongst trees. And I think, Janet, am I right? Is that some sort of chestnut or horse chestnut in the one on the left there? Hard to see.
Sorry, I turned my microphone off. There's a gymnastics class going on behind me, and I didn't want any of the hollers to get through. I can't quite make out the leaves. It looks like a compound leaf. Yeah, the horse chestnut. Yep.
I do
It's a good
wonder
city
about,
tree.
are there male female issues here where they might get ones that would have more fruit or more conkers or anything? I was curious sometimes because you are just sitting under these enormous trees, and I mean, look at this ground. Can you guys see this ground? There is not a leaf anywhere on this ground.
I was impressed in the little bit of Germany that I saw many years ago at how clean the woods were, period. And I was told by someone who spent some time there, was stationed there with the army and traveled around a bit, that the people go out pretty regularly and pick up debris from the floor of the woods. It's kind of a community thing to do. But no, there's no separate male female on the horse chestnuts. It's a heavy year. It's a heavy year.
Yeah.
Conkers are
And
going
of
to
course, these are closed. They close sometime in October. And that's doesn't matter the weather. My husband, who lived in Germany for a bit, is very emphatic about how much shade he got as a Canadian who would wear shorts when it was shorts weather. But no. After October 1st, it is not shorts weather. Doesn't matter what the thermometer says. So they do close most beer gardens over the winter, and potentially also that could come from all the leaf fall that would be probably quite the feat to keep up with.
I think you told me that it was pretty hot there while you were there.
It was very hot when we were there. I don't know if any of these pictures will show that, other than the gentleman with the sweat stain. It was very hot. It was between 28 and 31 degrees Celsius. So that's going to be what, low 80s, low to mid 80s. Yeah.
I've always been very interested or very amused, kind of, the fact that the Fahrenheit schedule, the Fahrenheit degree were set that 0 was as cold as Europe tended to get, and that 100 was, it never got warmer than that. So that's why they set the range where it is. And I think, boy, they never got colder than 0, and they don't in a lot of these places. They do have winter, but not that cold. Ruth is
Unfortunately, in some
asking
places in
about,
Europe, they're starting to get hotter than that now too, which is a shame. But yeah, I was going to ask about Ruth's question.
yeah, Ruth is asking about anything special to keep the trees healthy and alive with the paving stones and the constant traffic. Many of these trees started before there was uh, an automobile road nearby, and certainly before there were a lot of buried utilities put in. And they do, at least in some of the parks in Europe and some of the places where I've been. I haven't been nearly as widely traveled as Sonia and Cam, but they do designate tree areas as areas that can't be dug up. They do try to protect their big old trees. But some of them, you're looking at a deck on top of them. Basically, people are sitting in a great big deck area, and the deck itself is protecting the root zone that's underneath. And sometimes it's permeable paving. They're cobblestones all around, and water is able to get through.
I,
But
it, I was gonna say it's perfect timing, Ruth, on this question. I was trying to get a shot that would demonstrate it, but this particular beer garden is a deck over the city of Salzburg. So the city of Salzburg is down below. It's just the towers that are at our height, and we're looking down on, 6, 7, 8-story buildings. We're up in the cliff that Salzburg is built against, that the fortress is up on top of. So we are 6 stories off of what I would call, the ground here. So this tree in itself is effectively growing on a deck on a cliff, rather than sort of at street level or on street level. And in fact, one of the other beer gardens that we went to in Nuremberg, it's called the Krakauer Tour. I know it doesn't look like it, but this is at the top of a building. At top of we climbed 4 flights of stairs to get up here. Had some very good meats and breads and cheeses. Cam was particularly pleased with this spread. But this tree that we were sitting sort of 2 tables away from, this absolutely enormous maple, just a glorious, huge tree. Unfortunately, I don't have a good picture myself, but I found one online. This is where we are. We climbed up the stairs here and came out onto this deck here, and this is that tree. And I think I actually sent this picture to Janet and Steve saying, did the roots go all the way down? What is happening here? How is this? Granted, it's part of the old city wall. It's a very large medieval structure, but how is this happening? How does this work?
yeah, and almost certainly the roots found their way down like they do on a rocky cliff. The roots found their way down around stones and mortar that are in the building, and some of the ends of the roots are in the ground. Some of them are end in the wall. It's kind of like the trees in New York City. We should have Scott Pittman come and talk to us again about the trees in New York City and Manhattan that are growing in a hole in the cement. And we're not talking about near Central Park. We're talking about where everything is paved everywhere. The roots, if given the chance and started small, the roots can find themselves places.
And to Janet's point too, you can see that the ground, and this is relatively common. It might be pavers or a lot of that loose kind of gravel, sort of park gravel. So I'm assuming that the drainage is halfway decent. This is also in Nuremberg. This is the castle, the old fortress castle where the Holy Roman Emperor would come after being crowned. This is the ladies' quarter of the castle. This tower and this section here, and again another monstrous tree growing sort of in the ramparts of the castle.
And in the
Cam
case
tells
of,
me it's an earthwork, so it
that's
actually
right.
isn't just wall. Yeah.
That's right. In the case of a castle or a keep or a fort, there would be earth there because if you hit that with a cannonball, the earth absorbs a lot more impact than stone does. You can keep the wall together. So they would have had stone, soil, more stone.
Barbara, your question. For those of you who have traveled in Europe and are lucky enough to live in North America, especially the US, handicap accessibility and disability access is decades, I mean, near to a century behind where we are now. The ADA, the American with Disabilities Act, does not have any. As far as I know, there is not a significant equivalent, at least not for infrastructure, in most of the places in Europe I've ever been. So no, a lot of it honestly isn't massively accessible. Certainly not accessible in the way that Americans would be accustomed to. Eagle's Nest actually we walked up, but there was, as long as you can get on the buses, and they were city buses that kind of kneel and whatever, there is actually an elevator that you can take up. It's covered in gold because of course it is, because Nazis. But no, most of these city spaces are cobblestone hiking and not a lot of elevators. So it's a really excellent point. Although a good transition again. So this is an ancient castle that we went to. We also went to the 18th century, or at least the 18th century heyday, Schönbrunn Palace, which was the Habsburg seat. for the Holy Roman Empire. And this came into prominence in the sort of middle 18th century and then hit its high point in the 19th century. This was very accessible. Everything was very, very flat, very well paved, very groomed. Even the palace itself had lifts and other options. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the contrast between some of these old and ancient spaces, and even just the ancient idea of the beer garden with nature just right on top of you. And here, as with so many of the grand palaces in Europe, what we're really showcasing is human artistry. This is Schönbrun's version of Versailles Hall of Mirrors. This is where JFK met with Khrushchev, I think, for one of the big summits.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this palace is more focused on that kind of pomp, and the grounds are they are forested. Or it looks forested here, but it's very plotted, very geometric, very clean and flat. And let me tell you, all these strips, just begonias, just begonias as far as the eye can see, white and red begonias. I can't remember what the yellow was, but it was very uh, very unanimous, very flat, very boring. The plants is not what we were doing here. They did have the orangery, which is a cool practice of the very, very rich people being able to keep their citrus fruits outside during the summer and then inside all winter and continue to grow all their tropicals. So this is the orangery itself, this building back here. And out in the garden, they have what looks to us like a nursery. It's very, very familiar as a tree nursery with sort of labeled pots and rows. The orangery itself, in the winter, all of those would then be packed into this space that was used for dining halls and parties and assignations between royals, but they keep it empty year round now, which is a real shame. It would be remarkable to see it as it was in the 19th century, just full of all these citrus plants. It is a heated floor. There is piping, sort of old Roman style, not as old as the Romans, but the style of running the pipes under the paving so it would stay warm and circulated with water. So it's empty now, but still pretty impressive. And they did, I was on the lookout for historical gardening implements. They did have one of the wheelbarrows, one of the hand trucks that was used by the staff to haul these tropicals in and out, and that does not look particularly ergonomic. And they probably didn't worry too much about exactly how good a job it did, because the nature of families like the Habsburgs is that there are always servants behind you, buddy. We have an entire empire. We have a half a continent full of workers to do what needs doing to keep these massive houses alive.
You've given me an idea, Sonia, of someone that we should talk to and see if we can get them to talk with us on our webinar. There is an orangery in the United States White House.
Is
And
there?
yes, there is, and there is a gardener who takes care of it, and it would be interesting to talk to. It's a different person than who we interviewed years ago, but that would be really cool because they did
Yeah.
take and replicate some of those things that they'd seen in Europe, the grand kind of things that they saw. Yeah.
And do you know what I learned when we were in Vienna, which has an incredible museums quarter? Everything is just, there's nothing but the museums all in one area. And I thought, how cool. I wonder if the Smithsonian got this idea from Vienna and from the Habsburgs. Oh, no, 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 no. The Smithsonian started as an institution and as a place to gather the museums of the nation together. It beat the Habsburgs' intentions by almost 20 years. So in some cases, there are things that I think we actually managed to influence. So this is also on the grounds of Schönbrunn Palace, kind of classic palm house. We liked the green, really industrial feel here. Of course, you had to pay all the extra euros to get in, and we thought, you know what, we've been in palm houses before, so we just have external shots there. A kind of underwhelming rose garden. I did appreciate that all of the tagging, they have almost all the roses we saw were up as tree form, and the tagging was up high enough that you could read without leaning and hunching over, which might be an accessibility point to Barbara's question as well. But sort of underwhelming, kind of a garden variety rose garden, as it were. A Japanese garden that I think might have been impressive if we hadn't just been in Portland within the year and seen the Japanese gardens in Portland, which outside of the collections in Japan, I imagine is one of the best. So there were small amounts of gardens elsewhere on the palace grounds. Um, there was a maze. There's several mazes because, of course, you're not a royal family worth your salt unless you have a good hedge maze. But what I really want to talk about is this tree that's at the center of one of the mazes. And I know this is not a great shot, but it's a description of the plane tree and how they're among the largest trees in Europe. How old it is, about 150 years old, 30 meters high, a circumference of nearly 5.8 meters. And I liked down here, I'm a precious living organism. Please don't harm me. Let's see if I have that popped out there. And so if you look down, I think this can't be to protect the roots, or at least not significantly. I think it's to protect from people leaning over to carve things into the tree. And I appreciated that that note and that effort. Um, uh, yeah, Donna's saying Portland Japanese gardens are spectacular. Agreed. Maryland, never been to Nitobe Gardens, but always looking for good recommendations where to go. So I did like that this, grand royal house still did take the time and the effort to acknowledge what I think is the real royalty in the world. I mean, look at this thing. It stands out more in its landscape, I think, than the palace does in its setting. This is just a map of the grounds. This is the main house. It's just a folly up here. It's not even a real house. It just looks fancy. And then these are all the sort of geometric landscaped areas. The oldest zoo in Europe, it actually might be the oldest in the world, is here. We did not go in because, again, everything charged and we didn't have the time for that. But this section along here, I couldn't find a map that labeled it, but they called it the Botanic Gardens, just this stretch right along here. And I thought maybe we should go see what they called Botanic Gardens. And it was some of it was the Arboretum collection of the Habsburgs, that when they started on the colonial enterprise of running around the world grabbing things from everywhere in the 18th century. Some of those were specimen collections from that, but a lot of it felt like sort of just meadow area that I think was maybe not left entirely fallow, but naturalized. At least that is my generous reading thereof. And I don't know if Janet wants to contradict whether this is a naturalized or just an unkempt arboretum botanical garden space. But I will say this was another one of the spaces in the gardens. And I know that's not naturalized. That's just, even the Habsburgs can't always keep up with all the work that a garden is. That is absolutely some bindweed or oh, there's the bindweed there. Some bindweed relative, some silver lace relative. What a mess.
Yeah, all gardens took a real hit during COVID in Europe as well as in America, and they lost all of their volunteer work because they couldn't keep the volunteers safe. And volunteers do a lot of the weeding in a lot of botanical gardens all over the world. But there are very few places that you can really call natural in Europe. Almost every place has been remade over and over again. If there are questions that don't pertain to this travelogue, let's make
Please
sure that we
bring
get
in
these in, because we can depart from Germany and Austria here anytime if there are
any
pressing
point.
questions. Yeah. Otherwise, I will save what I had for this week. I'll just save it for next week. Those people who ask us questions, we do answer everything. If Marianne, if you're here, you don't have to be at a Free4All Friday to get an answer to your question. We answer everything that comes in. Sometimes it takes us a little while, but if we can put it into Free4All Friday, we do. Otherwise, even if it's in Free4All Friday, we've sent something or try to send something individually to the person who asked. So go ahead and send in your questions. We'll get them in there if we can. Ooh, neat.
This is another, it's what you're saying about very little is actually natural. Neither Cam nor I could find any good pictures. This is Nymphenburg Palace in Nuremberg. That's slightly smaller, actually a fair bit smaller than Schönbrunn. but its back acreage is all of the canals were hand dredged, but there's a section that is creeks, and you'd look at them quickly and think, yeah, that's a creek, all entirely handmade. And someone who spent a lot of time in the woods and a lot of time in the gardens, I was fooled. I was fooled at some of the attempted sort of naturalized spaces that were created. Again, late 18th century was big for this. But these particular canals, the big ones, they actually brought in gondolas from Venice, and you can still ride in a Venetian gondola in the middle of Munich. Along these canals, because they really just did decide, what in the world do I like? I'm going to bring it here. Is that a rhinoceros? Why not? Is that a gondola? Great. Let's take a pine from Western California and just put it all here. I wanted to note Nymphenburg because it had a lot of the similar vibe as Schönbrunn, a lot of the very geometric, all about the long walks. But you can even see from this picture much more diversity in their plantings and very pollinator friendly. All kinds of salvias, full of bees. I didn't get any good shots showing all the bees, but even though it still had a relatively uniform look, all the whites and the purples and the pinks, just head and shoulders over what Schönbrunn was doing for the sake of my own aesthetic, but also for the interest of the pollinators and of the Canadian geese, because I don't think anybody ever went to go get Canadian geese to bring them back to Europe because they liked them, but here they are. They are everywhere. So yeah, I appreciated the border here that felt more natural and more productive than a whole bunch of impatience. This was the opening shot that I started with. This is Schloss Mirabell in Salzburg, which bright-eyed, sharp-eyed people might recognize as the Do Re Mi gardens. This is standing just about at the steps where the Do a Deer song ends. I tried to take a bunch of pictures here because I'm a Sound of Music fan, but Cam, who dragged us to the top of the Eagle's Nest, decided that I couldn't spend as much time as I wanted to with Sound of Music tourism. But again, it was a lovely public space and maybe not as great a horticultural space as elsewhere. But speaking of Sound of Music, these are two Sound of Music locations in Salzburg. This is St. Peter's Abbey, the oldest, one of the oldest still working Christian abbeys in Europe. That it was the basis for the end of Sound of Music. For those of you who know the shot, when they're running from the Nazis and they're hiding in the sort of gated cemetery graves, and they're hiding behind a big headstone, and the Nazis are coming along and rattling the gates. That's based on. It's shot in a sound studio in California, but it's based on this. Graveyard. There's also catacombs that are not underground. They're called catacombs, but they're carved into the cliff. So you actually go up into 10th century catacombs. Cool. This is the abbey where Maria in the movie and the real Maria actually lived and was in training to become a nun. And why I bring these two up is because these are both graveyards, and the abundance of flowers that accompany graveyards and accompany cemeteries was something that I was continually struck by throughout Germany, throughout Austria. Maybe not the most impressive horticultural displays, not the most variety, but that cemeteries are places of gardening, of blooming, and I found it really touching. This is a massive cemetery. If you walk out of Nuremberg it walked for about an hour and a half or so along the river, massive, huge cemetery. And every grave had something growing in it, on it, among it. Just marvelous to see. And everywhere throughout the cemetery, this is a water trough. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a spigot here, and it's just resting water trough and a compost bin and a garbage bin. As you walk into the cemetery, there are just take them as you need them, watering cans, so that you can go and work on your family's plot or whatever plot you've been maybe hired to do. As you come into one of the gates of the cemetery, there is actually a nursery, a garden center right there with potted plants that you can that you can plan. And I was so struck and so touched by the idea of this is clearly a cultural intention, to make graveyards places where things continually grow, even if they are just kind of goofy annuals.
And
Even this is also, oh, sorry, please. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that, and we noticed the same thing in the Netherlands, in Denmark, Stephen and I, that for generations, this has been gardened. I mean, it isn't
Mhm.
just a single person's plot, it's a family plot. Many times it's, there are urns buried there, not actual people, actual whole bodies, but yeah.
And
And
even in a cemetery where there isn't ground to garden in, this is also in Nuremberg, but it's closer into the center of the city. This is St. Johannes. This is where Albrecht Dürer is buried, the Renaissance artist. This is ancient. This is almost as old as kind of your classic European graveyard gets, and you can't garden in the ground, and yet everything is still gardened. There is still, it's a mobile compost bin, right? You can collapse it down. There's the watering cans. There's the trough with the spigot. This was just such a consistent and such a lovely thing to see. Really, really moved me. To the point that I was poking my head into cemeteries everywhere just to see here too. Yep, here too. Overall, I just really appreciated the public spaces and the public dedication to being in the grounds, natural or otherwise. Oh, I see a question from Ruth. Do they use the same kinds of potting soil in Europe as we have in the U.S. and Canada? Sphagnum or other peat, compost, manure? Where do they get it? Do you know what's funny is we were eating our sandwich in the Friedhof, the West Friedhof cemetery, and I said, I kind of wish my mom and dad were here. I wish Janet and Steve were here, but we'd never get them out of here. They would have been stopping every person that walked along to ask about, who are you gardening for? How do you garden here? What have you noticed about the gardening here? So I unfortunately don't have that answer because I don't do as good a job as them as finding a gardener and pulling them
I
aside.
can
Janet,
I
do
can
you have any
answer I
idea?
can answer to a certain extent for England and the Netherlands, where there's a company, I think it's called John Innes, Innes, John Innes mixes. There's a number of different mixes that, and if you are a concerted gardener, then you use Innis mix number 4 or you use Innis mix number 5 that have varying amounts of peat, bark, compost in them. And where do they get them? I think the same thing that we do. There are municipal composting and industrial composting areas. I'm not sure where all of the peat comes from, but certainly there's a lot of peat still in Ireland and Scotland in the bog areas. So they may still be harvesting peat, but they are using soilless mixes. They're even developing some of the soilless mixes that we're using. And we saw them very much used, and a lot of hydroponics as well in the Netherlands as well as England.
Speaking of what you know about English gardens, this is in Munich, right downtown. This is called the English Gardens. In fact, it's a park space more than a garden space. But the water is very clear, very cold, and it was a very hot day. So I saw what everyone was doing. I said, well, I guess this is when I sit with my feet in the water and teach myself German by reading Jane Eyre, which is a book that I know well enough that I could guess at what words meant. But this is one of the open spaces in the English Gardens, and I don't know if you can quite see along here, but this is the degree to which these spaces are used. Just packed full of people. And granted, this was August, this was vacation time, but that appreciation of the green and the open spaces is much like the cemeteries, just made me happy to see. The English Gardens in Munich are also notable because it is one of the few places, maybe one of the only places, where in the center of a European capital, it's a regional capital, but in the center of a European capital, I mean, literally the center of town, you can surf. And people sit and watch the surfers hit the waves along this particular bridge, and they play music, and it's a surprising and entirely delightful thing to stumble upon there in the English Gardens.
Is it a rapids or is it a manufactured wave
It's
pool?
manufactured. Yep, the same thing. These all here are manufactured. I'm assuming pretty similar, probably to the Nymphenburg systems of canals that they put in. There is a river whose name is escaping me right now. One of the major European rivers No, it's not the Danube. The Danube's down in Vienna. Anyway, it's one of the major European rivers, does go through Munich, and these are offshoots from it. But this is um, a manufactured flow under this bridge, and it is fast. Further down the river here, we saw some people swimming in it, and um, they were moving. Yeah, very, very fast rapids. This is a park whose name I never even caught, just because it reminded me a bit of my time in Edinburgh, and when I lived briefly in Oxford in England. That over the summer, if it was a sunny day and a hot day, you knew that the next day everyone would just come to work sunburned, because the opportunity to go out and just lay and sleep in the sun, and soak it up is really nice. I want to end with another way that gardens and green spaces were that we came upon them in our travels. So this is a view out over Vienna, from the top of a flak tower from World War II that the Axis powers built and never really used, and has now been converted into an aquarium. Huge, tall tower. So we were up at the top, and a lot of the buildings, they're beautiful, but they all look pretty similar. And of course, you would make use of your park spaces if this is your city and you don't have your own yards to be in. And a lot of the streets look like this. Again, beautiful. One of the most beautiful city centers I've ever been in, but a bit sterile, a bit samey. And then as you come along one street over, sort of in the poorer western quarter of Vienna, we have a break in that uniformity, and we have this complex known as the Hundertwasser House. I'm not sure, has anyone here heard of or seen, perhaps, since we have travelers. Marilyn, I'm not sure if you made it over to Vienna as well, but it's an incredible project that an architect, an artist, a philosopher named Friedenreich Hundertwasser decided that housing should be beautiful housing should be accessible. So this is a housing project. This is low income housing. It was built and designed as low income housing. It's in a poorer part of the city, and it was Hundertwasser's intent to sort of use as a proof of concept that just because you are poor, just because you can only afford to live in state housing, you still should have access to art and beauty and strangeness, and avant-garde life, and you should have access to green spaces. So he believed that everyone had the right to air. They had the right to their window of air, and their right to, as far as a human can reach out the window, that is their space as well, to put whatever they want out there. That the air belongs to the people living there, not just the foundations. The ICER, thank you, Judith. My husband somewhere in Canada has perked his head up and went, "She's done it again. She's forgotten a key geographical fact again." Yes, thank you. So Hundertwasser, wonderful green roofs. This is a model kind of showing the complex overall, a strange and unique and powerful place. This is standing in.
We should note that Germany is light years ahead of us. Matter of fact, most of Europe is light years ahead of us in terms of green roofs and handling water that needs to not just run straight into storm drains. They require buildings to handle water that falls on their roofs themselves in place.
And Hundertwasser, I'm going to drop his the sort of the website that I found that's for him and his projects. I'm just going to drop it into the chat. He's from Vienna, and my understanding is that this is sort of his flagship project, but he's also done things like convenience stations on the expressway, that, you know, just because you work at the McDonald's on the rest stop gas station doesn't mean that you shouldn't have access to art in your life. So I want to wrap us up and kind of bring together my four pieces, uh, my public spaces, my attention to the integration, the fundamental integration of public life with green spaces, with the trees that we saw in the walks along to the beer gardens, and the massive sycamores from Schönbrunn, and the cemeteries full of plantings. Turns out Hundertwasser has a quote for this. A person should be buried only half a meter or 2 feet below the surface. Then a tree should be planted there. He should be buried in a coffin that decays, so that when you plant a tree on top, the tree will take something out of his substance and change it into tree substance. When you visit the grave, you don't visit a dead man. You visit a living being who was just transformed into a tree. You say, "This is my grandfather. This tree is growing well. Fantastic." You can develop a beautiful forest that will be more beautiful than a normal forest, because the trees will have their roots in graves. It will be a park, a place for pleasure, a place to live, even a place to hunt. So thank you to Friedensreich Hundertwasser for giving me this quote that could tie together all of the ways that I was experiencing gardens and gardening and green space in Germany and Austria. And thanks to everyone for listening.
That's wonderful, Sonia, absolutely wonderful. I will take back the screen and just say two things that you might want to remember for now, for whatever you're doing in the gardens on these nice days. Yes, it's cold in the morning, but it warms up very quickly. So let's see if we can find them. Go. I want to point out something that you should go out and take a look at, that the skies actually are, as Steve and I always comment, you can tell that it's fall. The sky is bluer in fall than any other time of year, except on certain winter days when it's dry, very dry. In the fall, with the sun at a low angle, the sky is, the air is cleaner, less pollen grains floating around, and less moist. So there are not particles that scatter the light waves. You know how you can put a prism up and change white light coming from the outside into a band of red and orange and green and yellow. The blue rays are shorter wavelengths, and they more readily get knocked aside by particles in the air. When there are fewer particles in the air, we see more blue. We see bluer lakes, we see bluer reflections. So enjoy the light outside, and enjoy the fact that even in a year with rather muted fall colors in many areas that were dry this year, because there's so much brown in the leaves, you can still see a beautiful background for those trees and shrubs that you planted, so that you would get fall color. So make sure that you go out and see the fall color that you planned for. I also, I have this one issue here that I can't get to my little controls because for whatever reason, there we go. All right, now I have to get to the other control. I have to keep moving things around. There we go.
For those of you who've ever presented on Zoom, it is just kind of a nightmare for the interface. And I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about. Windows everywhere.
Yeah. We've talked about letting things be a little wild in your yard, and how wild we like things in our yard. And that's good for wild areas, but not necessarily good for a controlled garden, something that you want to keep more under control. Now is the time to go and cut things down. I worked in this garden, my only truly perennial managed garden in our new property. And I took out a number of things, including things that were blooming. Some of them are blooming out in our wild areas, so I can apologize to the pollinators who are still working on the calendula. But if you leave things up until they get killed by frost, those stems are so much harder to cut than when they're crisp. So I took the calendula out. See the peony behind Roseanne geranium. I took the peony out. I took out calendula over here. I took out a vernal sweet pea. I took out fallen stems of the obedient plant, so that I end up with a garden that I can still appreciate the flowers. They're not lost in all of the things that are going down to debris. I can gradually keep cutting other things out and leave the evergreens, like the euphorbia back here and the juniper up here, and the sedums that are evergreen. and you can enjoy your garden more. And do when you go out. This is a peony. This is the peony that I cut down. It's an Ito peony, one of the hybrids between tree peony and herbaceous peony. And all that's left of it are those white bits. Can you see them there? That's the stem I cut down. Some buds are above ground, but believe me, it has buds below ground. You want white, clean stems. You don't want your peonies taking their particular leaf disease into their roots. So get out and cut some things down. Enjoy the fall days and enjoy the light that you can see. And when you cut things out of the way, then you'll see the dandelion that you missed all year. These were in that garden. The grass that somehow got itself started underneath the calendula by the pincushion flower. And I cut back Roseanne, the geranium, who was trying very hard to smother a hellebore and some other plants that were under there. So enjoy your gardens. Get out there a little bit more. It'll give you a reason to go to the nurseries, as Steve and I did, and got some new plants. They're on sale. They're not as deeply discounted as once upon a time when we would go to the garden center in the fall because they know that we're all still trolling for plants, but you can get some good discounts and some very pretty plants to put in. Do be careful not to fall for the things that are on the wild that are still blooming. This is a vetch. I don't know if it's milk vetch or cow vetch. There are just too many vetches and I put them all under V, blooming right now. And some people call it wild snapdragon. It's Linaria or toad flax, blooming yellow. Those things that are blooming in the wild this late are often pretty invasive. So learn them before you buy them and get them loose in your garden. So with that,
We have a
I
quick
think
question in from Marion, actually, whether tree peony should be cut down as well.
tree peonies can be cut down if they need to be cut down because you're reshaping them. But if you cut a standard tree peony down, not one of the hybrids, its only buds for next year's flowers are on the branches. So you're not going to get any bloom the next year. Sometimes not for 2 years, because like many plants, it takes a little while for it to make wood and set the buds. So you can cut them and you can certainly sort out the branches, but be prepared to lose some bloom on the tree peony if you have to cut it down. But the hybrids got the best of both. I also, like I say, we answer questions individually. So your question about seeds, Lisa, we sent to you already, but we're going to show it to other people next week, and probably we'll get some more comments from people about saving seeds and when to sow them. So I think that will probably do it here. We have 2 minutes left if someone else has any question. I'm glad you could make it, Marion. Marion emailed us to say, I like these Fridays, but I can't get there all the time. It's why we record them and we put them onto our YouTube channel so that everybody can see them. But we also understand we all have lives, and sometimes it's hard for us to make the time to do this, but we figure if one person makes the time and makes the space for people to get together, drop in as you will. I cut down goat's beard, Sue, unless it is, we have the dwarf hybrid goat's beard in our front yard as a little hedge, and we leave that one up because it remains a little hedge. It has no leaves on it, but its structure is still there. But the full-size goat's beard out in the back garden, that it isn't something that I see in the wintertime. I go ahead and cut that down. So you can definitely cut it down, and you can cut it all the way down to the ground. Thank you, Sonia, very much for being here. I know that you're
You're
very
welcome.
busy watching the nieces and the dogs and visiting friends and trying to fit in everything on your sabbatical year. You're spending so much time with us. I feel really, really, really blessed. Thank you.
Well, if I can take just a little bit more time, because Carol has sent me a direct message that I just want to reply to out loud because it'll be faster than typing. She said that she was Google mapping the distance between Munich and Salzburg, and that it's only the distance between Clio and downtown Detroit. And that's exactly it. They're quite close. We did the loop, Munich over to Vienna, down to Salzburg. Well, actually Nuremberg to Vienna to Salzburg, and then back up. Did Ken learn any brewing tips he can use? No, and he decided that he just wanted to drink, and he wanted to drink at his favorite places where he first learned, as he says, to love good beer. So even though he didn't learn how to brew here, he learned how to like good beer here. There in Germany. Although now in the States has great craft brewing. Anyway, so thanks for letting me answer Carol out loud, and thanks everyone. And I guess signing off from Garden A to Z headquarters.
Signing off from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. Send us your questions if you've got questions. Move those plants around now. It's a good time to grow. Keep them watered well if it's not raining in your area, because they need it, but they can grow such amazing new root systems when you move them in the fall, and they can grow roots all the way until they start getting leaves next spring. We'll see you our next, whoops, I guess I can go here to our sign off sheet so that when I edit this video to put up, people will know where they were, where they came to. So as we look at the last of the sweet shrub, summer sweet clethra, and witch hazel in fall color, and hickories, and willows. Our next, that's it for Free for All Friday number 22. We'll be back next Friday at 7 o'clock, and we hope we'll see you there. If you're not a subscriber, you can just go to the Fridays page. If you want to be a subscriber, whenever we get around to sending out a newsletter, we send it to everybody. We send Free for All Friday invitations to everybody on our list. Those who come to our webinars are special subscribers. So if you want to come to our webinars on Saturday mornings, then you need to contact us with an email and say, hey, I want in for webinar number 169 or for all of them. Just send us an email. We'll work it out for you. You're welcome. Talk to you later. I'm going to go and check on the hockey players now.
Take
See you
care,
soon.
everyone. Bye.